Starting off at number 10 now, we have the mental hospital. In 2015, a construction crew in Indiana discovered a time capsule from 1958 that was put there by the staff of a former mental hospital. It contained their message to the future, to us, and it was in the form of a video. The experts were excited to hear what the message would say, but were disappointed to find that most of the audio was missing. It had degraded over the years. There was only a little bit left at the end, where an unknown man said, "When the psychiatrists of the future open this time capsule, only they will be able to tell how well we've solved our treatment problems." The audio cuts out, and when it returns, the men are discussing electroshock therapy, a common practice in the 50s used to treat mental disorders, which has fallen out of favour and been heavily criticised over the years. Now, the hospital eventually closed down in 1992. Historians have a hard time figuring out who are the men in the actual video and what the missing audio parts were, especially when it comes to electroshock therapy. Next up at number 9 now, we have Abandon. This one comes from Imgur, where a user shared a strange box they found in their grandmother's house while helping her clear up. It was a safe, but the grandmother didn't know the combination. They took a hammer and a chisel to it, and when they finally opened it up, they quickly realized it was a time capsule. The grandmother believed it must have been put together by her own grandmother many years ago. That made it at least 4 generations old. Inside, they discovered a note that read, "Abandon all regret, ye who enter here." That's a famous line from Dante's Divine Comedy. Now, they figured it may be a sort of ominous warning, but they continued to look through the contents. They found a bag with Chinese calligraphy on, which read "Double Happiness." Inside, they found a pen, a plastic box, a suede pouch, and an oil lamp. They also found pictures of the grandmother's own grandparents. They were glad they didn't heed the creepy warning on the note. Moving on to number 8 now, we have J.M. Barrie. That's the name written on a trunk that was discovered in 2010 by 2 women who were clearing out an abandoned building in LA. J.M. Barrie was a nurse from Scotland, and she had the same initials as James M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, also Scottish. When they opened the trunk up, they were horrified to find the bodies of 2 babies in there from the 1930s. They were wrapped in sheets and hidden in 2 doctor's bags along with some old newspapers and other belongings. Investigators found no connection between the 2 individuals though, even though a copy of Peter Pan was found with the babies, and there was also membership papers for the Peter Pan Woodland Club Resort. Coroners reported no signs of trauma on the babies and could find no evidence that they had been aborted. One of them had clearly reached full term, while the smaller one may have been born prematurely. Despite there being no concrete link between Peter Pan and the babies, some people have speculated there is one, and that it has something to do with Never Never Land, where children never grow up. Is that a little bit morbid? Do you think there's something darker to this story than meets the eye? Moving on to number 7 now, we have The Boy. In 2016, a demolition crew in Albuquerque, New Mexico discovered a time capsule from 1968 near a former elementary school. It appeared to have been made by a boy at the time who wanted it to be found at some point in the future. The workers were prepared for a cute message, but the letter they found inside proved to be quite a bit creepier. It read, "I am dead. I go to Montgomery School. That is the olden school name. I was born in 1900. You auto, now I dead. My favourite subject is spooking the police. I play the guitar. In case you don't know what it is a board with strings on them. I am 10 years old. See you later, savages." That was it. That was the whole letter. It was signed by a boy called Greg Lee Youngman. Now, efforts to find Greg today have been mostly unsuccessful. Some people say that's because there really was some sort of guitar playing ghost from a century ago living near that school who had just left the letter. Others say it was just a kid with a large imagination. Either way, the letter itself is pretty creepy. Moving on now to number 6, we have Mother. This is a horrifying story from 2016. A woman in North Carolina thought she had struck an absolute bargain when she bought a freezer from her neighbor for just $30. When she opened it at home though, she was horrified to find human remains in the freezer. The neighbor had put her own mother inside there and simply told the buyer she had been using it as a time capsule. In an interview, the buyer said, "She sold me her frozen mother for $30. How do you do something like that?" I think an even better question would be why. She said she hadn't seen her neighbour's mother in months but didn't really suspect any foul play. When the police went to investigate on that day, they found the daughter had already left town, telling the buyer that she was going to West Virginia to visit her mother in a nursing home, even though she knew full well where her mother really was. Coming in at number 5 now, we have Hiroshima. In January 1968, two Japanese companies agreed to create a joint time capsule project in celebration of Japan's World Exposition Fair in 1970. It was intended to be buried for 5,000 years. The upper capsule was opened in 2000 and is intended to be open every 100 years thereafter. It was intended to give the people of the future an insight into the world of 1970 and also the everyday life of Japanese people. It contained artifacts recorded through art, literature and music. It also contained some more unusual items, including a slinky toy, some glass eyeballs and the black fingernail of a Hiroshima atomic bomb survivor. It had only been 25 years since the US dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima that led to Japan's surrender, and it was still fresh in the mind of many Japanese people. Human fingernails are made of keratin, which does not decompose, and so this one should still be intact in the year 6970, 5,000, well, almost 5,000 years from now. The time capsule's creators felt that this will serve as a grisly but important reminder of the horrors of war for all future generations. Next up at number 3 now, we have The Apartment. In June 2010, a French woman called Solange Beaugueron died in the south of France, aged 91. When the executors of her will were going through her records, they discovered that she actually owned an entire apartment in Paris that she had never even mentioned before. They noticed that she had been making regular payments for this place for decades. When they finally opened it up, they were astonished to find the apartment had been untouched for all this time. It contained countless paintings, furniture, and common elements of early 20th century life. The whole apartment was a time capsule frozen in time. It turns out that Solange had inherited the apartment after her grandmother died in 1939. At some point during the Second World War, Solange had left the apartment in Paris and fled to the south of France from the Nazis when they arrived. She never mentioned the apartment to anyone but continued to pay for it over all those years, while the priceless paintings just gathered dust. One of them even sold for €3 million at auction. Moving on now to number 2, we have Einstein. In 1939, Albert Einstein wrote a letter to go with the contents of a time capsule that was being buried to commemorate the New York World's Fair. It remains 50 feet underground at Flushing Meadows and is not meant to be open again until the year 6939, 5,000 years after it was buried. Einstein's letter contained some creepily accurate predictions about the future. He talked about the great achievements that science had made in his time, but said that production and distribution of commodities is entirely unorganized, so that everybody must live in fear of being eliminated from the economic cycle, in this way suffering for the want of everything. Furthermore, people living in different countries kill each other at irregular time intervals, so that also for this reason, anyone who thinks about the future must live in fear and terror. This is due to the fact that the intelligence and character of the masses are incomparably lower than the intelligence and character of the few who produce something valuable for the community. When people hear about that message, they often feel like it resembles the world that we live in today. Are people living in constant fear of violence or economic threat? I'm sure the comment section in this video will have a lot to say about that. And finally, at number 1 now, we have trophies. A while ago, a man was using his metal detector in some woods when he came across a time capsule. He excitedly opened it, but soon found some disturbing items inside. It was filled with a teddy bear, clothes, photos, a camera, and a girl's Pee-wee softball medal from 2003. It looked like the belongings of a young girl. Soon, people began to speculate that the time capsule actually held the trophies of a serial killer. If true, it's thought the killer wanted to hold on to these mementos of the people they've murdered. They'd chosen the forest as the secluded spot where nobody would find it. They didn't count on this man with his metal detector. The police investigated but concluded that the items were probably innocent memorabilia left as a time capsule by their owner. They tested the items for DNA and began to reference it to the list of unsolved crimes, hoping to find a match that might lead to solving a murder from the past. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Star Wars Capsule. Even some of the biggest Star Wars fans in the world might not know that there is a secret Star Wars time capsule somewhere out there. It's buried at Skywalker Ranch in California. It was put there by Star Wars creator George Lucas. He put it in the corner of the building and filled it with secret artifacts from the Star Wars movies. George was once asked when would this time capsule be opened, and he said never. Literally never. Well, not quite never, but he wants it to be discovered in the distant future by archaeologists. This is bad news for die-hard Star Wars fans out there who are really hoping to one day see the priceless contents of this time capsule. Moving on now to number 9, we have the Millennium Time Capsule. Now, as you guys might guess from the name, this time capsule was buried at the turn of the millennium in the year 2000. It was sealed by the White House and contains a number of culturally significant items from history. These include a CD, photos of Earth from space, a computer chip, a World War II helmet, a cell phone, a piece of the Berlin Wall, and even a photo of Rosa Parks. There's also a pair of Ray Charles sunglasses, because, you know, why not? For me though, the most interesting thing they put in there might actually be Twinkies. Yeah, an actual pack of Twinkies. However, I also read that the Twinkies were later removed because they were attracting mice. I guess people in 1,000 years will know a lot about our world, but almost nothing about Twinkies. What a shame. Next up at number 8 now, we have the largest time capsule. The town of Seward, Nebraska claims to have the world's largest time capsule. It was constructed by local store owner Harold Keith Davison, who wanted his grandchildren to know what his life was like when he buried it in 1975. The 45-ton vault was buried under a mound of dirt on the front lawn of his appliance store. It's packed with artifacts from his own life and also general items from the 1970s. The most striking item has to be his Chevy Vega car, which still sits inside the vault to this day. Moving on now to number 7, we have the Westinghouse time capsules. These are a pair of time capsules prepared by the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company. The first one was buried for the 1939 New York World Fair and contained fabrics, metals, plastics, literature, art, and news events from the time recorded on microfilm. The capsules are intended to be open in the year 6939, a full 5,000 years after they were buried. In that distant future, our language and culture may be so different that whoever finds the capsule may not know what to do with any of the items inside. This is why the creators of the time capsule included detailed instructions on how to make a microfilm viewer and also a projector for the newsreels. I'm sure the future humans will really appreciate that. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Helium Centennial Time Columns Monument. This was constructed in 1968 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the discovery of helium. The time capsule is actually made up of 4 different parts. The different parts are supposed to be opened after 25 years and 50, then 100, and then 1,000 years. The first 2 have already been opened, but the third will not be open until the year 2068 and the final one until the year 3068. Now that last capsule contains a passbook for a $10 savings account from an Oklahoma City bank, which draws 4% interest every year. After 1,000 years, it will be worth over $1 quadrillion. So definitely worth the wait. Next up at number 5 now, we have Keo. Technically, Keo isn't a time capsule yet, but for me it's too interesting to not include on this list. Keo is a proposed space time capsule which was intended to launch back in 2003. It would be set on a course that would lead back to Earth 50,000 years in the future. It sounded like the perfect time capsule. It will be out there drifting in space without ever being tainted or ruined by people here on Earth. And what would the world look like when it finally landed again in 50,000 years? Well, fans of the project have been left wondering those questions. The project was delayed until 2006, then to 2007, then 2008, then 2010, and then basically every year since then. Currently, the Keo website cites 2009 as its launch. They're inviting every person in the world to contribute to their capsule. They're looking for people to post messages to the people living 50,000 years in the future. They promise that every message will be included without any censorship. Although Keo has been delaying its launch now for over 15 years, many people still send their messages to them just in case the project ever does go ahead. Moving on now to number 4, we have the CN Tower. Some of you may be surprised to learn that our channel is based in Toronto, Canada. Perhaps the most iconic landmark in this city is the CN Tower. Standing at over 1,800 feet, it's towered over the city since its completion in 1976. To mark the occasion, a time capsule was placed at the very top of the tower inside the walls of the lookout level. It's intended to be opened in the year 2076, a century after its completion. Inside, the contents contain a letter from former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, letters from school children at the time, copies of 3 newspapers, Canadian coins and bills, and even a video about how the tower was constructed. Isn't that nice? Next up at number 3 now, we have the Crypt of Civilization. This is a sealed, airtight chamber from 1940 at Oglethorpe University in Georgia. The 2,000 cubic foot room contains many artifacts from the time, including everyday items, famous books, voice recordings of people such as Franklin Roosevelt or Adolf Hitler, and even a sound recording of Popeye. Don't know why. The time capsule was thought up by Thornwell Jacobs, who felt that there was so little information available from ancient civilizations and that someone had to make sure that this never happened again. He stated that because the ancient Egyptian calendar was established 6,177 years before this vault was sealed, that is also how long the vault should be sealed for. This means the Crypt of Civilization will not be opened until the year 8113. So far only about 78 years have passed, so there's still quite a while to go yet. At the number 2 spot now, we have Time Capsule Expo 1970. In 1968, 2 Japanese companies, Panasonic and the Mainichi newspapers, agreed to build a joint time capsule for the Japan World Exposition in 1970. It was opened up again in the year 2000 to examine its contents. It was decided that the capsule would be checked for this every 100 years. For how long, I hear you ask? Until the year 6968, 5,000 years after it was buried. When archaeologists of the future dig it up, they will find the time capsule contains items such as false teeth, a glass eye, insects in resin, an origami book, handcuffs, and even fake money. A competition was held among local Japanese school children to write a letter to the people living 5,000 years in the future. The winning entry read, "How are you, people of 5,000 years from now? I wish I could live again in your age, but I am quite happy now. I have kind parents and also a sister with whom I quarrel with once in a while. We must do our best until the next age takes over. Goodbye from 5,000 years in the past." And finally at number 1 now, we have the Yahoo Capsule. In 2006, tech company Yahoo set up a time capsule project where users could contribute to how digital life was like in the year 2006. When they cut off the submissions, they had received over 170,000 messages, with the largest amount coming from people in their 20s. The collection was then sealed and given to the Smithsonian Folkways Recordings in Washington DC. It was decided that the capsule will be opened in 2020 to mark the 25th birthday of Yahoo. The capsule will only have been sealed for about 14 years by that point, but as I'm sure many of you are aware, that might as well be 1,000 years when it comes to the changing landscape of the internet. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Disneyland. Most people who visit Disneyland in California are there for the rides, the shows, and the fireworks. Very few of the millions of visitors are aware of the Disneyland time capsule. In 1995, cast members of the park built a time capsule to commemorate the park's 40th anniversary. The plaque reads, "A time castle containing Disneyland memories, messages, and milestones lies beneath this spot. The Disneyland time capsule is dedicated to the children of the 21st century who may unlock its contents on the 80th anniversary of Disneyland, July 17th, 2035. The time capsule is buried in the center court off Main Street. It contains photos, newspapers, an Indiana Jones decoder card, whatever that is, and loads of other Disneyland memorabilia. Disney California Adventure also did the same thing in 2012, leaving a time capsule there to be opened in 2037. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the Immortality Drive. This one is just too cool. I love this one. The Immortality Drive is a large memory device that was taken to the International Space Station on October 12, 2008. It contains the digitalized DNA sequence of a select group of humans. These include Stephen Hawking, Stephen Colbert, Joe Garcia, Richard Garriott, Tracy and Laura Hickman, as well as Matt Morgan and Lance Armstrong. So why are the DNA sequences of all these random famous people there? Well, the purpose is to preserve human DNA in this time capsule in Earth's orbit in case some global cataclysm happens down here. That's right, if there was some sort of nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse that just wipes out most of humanity, scientists could theoretically use this DNA time capsule to help restart the population. Or maybe it's not even meant for the scientists but for aliens that finally get here in a million years and all they find is the Immortality Drive, and maybe they just make new humans from it. I think I just wrote a sci-fi movie. Coming in at number 8 now, we have the General Dynamics Astronautics Time Capsule. This time capsule consists of a booklet simply titled 2063 AD. It was sealed in July 1963 and contains predictions by scientists, politicians, astronauts and military commanders about the state of space exploration in the year 2063. The introduction to the booklet reads as follows. This archive records the predictions sealed in a time capsule during ceremonies commemorating the 5th anniversary of the dedication of the General Dynamics Astronautics Facility. The time capsule is located on the west ramp entrance of the General Dynamics Astronautics Facility at 5001 Kearney Villa Road, San Diego, California. The capsule is to be opened on July 13, 2063. Now guys, I found this one quite interesting because we're already over the halfway point now to 2063. There's only 44 years left out of the 100. Maybe I don't know enough about space travel at the moment, but honestly, humanity doesn't seem to have done too much in terms of at least manned missions since the 1960s. Hopefully someone who knows a lot more than me can tell me I'm very wrong in the comment section below. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the MLK time capsule. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous I Have a Dream speech at the Western Plaza in Washington, D.C. 25 years later, in 1988, Western Plaza was renamed Freedom Plaza in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. A time capsule was also buried there to commemorate the occasion. It contains an assortment of MLK's personal items such as his Bible, a robe he wore to preach in, and even some audio recordings of some of his speeches. The time capsule is set to be opened in 2088, exactly 100 years after it was first laid down. Next up, number 6 now, we have FDR's time capsule. In 1940, former US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt buried a time capsule. It was buried at the University of Pennsylvania and it's massive. It weighs over 450 pounds. That's pretty heavy for a time capsule. There must be some serious load in there, but the interesting thing is, nobody knows what's inside it. That's pretty strange. You'd think that a massive time capsule buried by an actual US president at a university would be well documented, but it's not really. The only thing we know other than its weight is when it can be opened. 2040, exactly 100 years after FDR laid it down. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited to know what's inside this. We just have to wait though. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Nickelodeon. Disney aren't the only kids company that have got in on the time capsule game. In 1992, a time capsule was buried at Nickelodeon Studios. It was later moved to a different studio in 2005 and then again in 2016. It now lies at the Nickelodeon Animation Studio and is set to be opened in 2042, 50 years after it was first sealed. So, what's inside? Well, Nickelodeon got together with the Kids World Council, yes that's a real thing, and they decided what was the most important things to kids at that time. These included movies such as Back to the Future and Home Alone on VHS of course, MC Hammer and Michael Jackson CDs, a Nintendo Game Boy, rollerblades and some Reebok Pump sneakers. They also put pencils, a skateboard, a baseball and even a Twinkie in there. This is actually the second time capsule I've talked about recently where they put a Twinkie inside. What is all that about? I've heard that Twinkies do last for years if they are sealed in their packets. Is that why? Are people burying Twinkies and just sort of storing them for future generations to try? Will they like them? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. Maybe Twinkies will actually still be sold then, now I think about it. Awkward. Moving on now to the number 4 spot, we have Perth Observatory. This building was constructed in 1896 in order to help keep time for the whole of Western Australia. When the foundation was laid, the ceremony was attended by Sir John Forrest and a number of other notable dignitaries. They constructed a time capsule out of a lead box and placed it directly beneath a foundation stone. According to the local press, it contained Rontgen raised tubes, a description of the process together with specimen photographs. These were all donated by X-ray pioneer William John Hancock. This time capsule is quite special because it's not only the first known time capsule buried in that area, but in the whole of Australia in general. At the time of recording this video, this time capsule has been underground for over 122 years and counting. There are currently no plans to open the time capsule unless the building is destroyed for some reason. The government announced in 2013 that all research programs would be cut at the observatory, but the building itself would remain open for tours. That means that for the time being, the oldest time capsule in Australia remains safely in place, with no plans to open it in the near future. Next up at the number 3 spot now, we have the largest axe. axe. In 1991, a monument called the World's Largest Axe was built in New Brunswick to celebrate the legacy of Canadian lumberjacks. It's an impressive sight to see. It may very well be the largest axe in the world, but not everyone knows that there is actually a time capsule hidden in the head of the axe. The axe is 23 feet long and made of a solid 55 tons of steel. The handle goes up 50 feet into the air, and the stump that the axe is buried into is made of concrete and is 33 feet in diameter. Mind-blowing dimensions there. The time capsule is buried inside the head of this huge structure, and it looks like it will remain this way unless someone attempts to destroy it. Obviously that would be horrible, and good luck trying to destroy the world's biggest axe anyway. One day in the distant future it may be discovered though, as long as nobody forgets where it is. Otherwise I doubt that people would just go randomly breaking open the largest axe in the world. Did I mention it was the largest axe in the world? Moving on to number 2 spot now, we have the Bacardi capsule. A lot of the time capsules that I've talked about in these videos are buried by governments or schools, that sort of thing. This is definitely the first one I've talked about that was buried by a rum company, or at least an alcohol company, specifically Bacardi. It was buried in the Bacardi headquarters in Bermuda to celebrate 150 years since Bacardi was founded. It was intended to be a sort of living snapshot of the company in 2012 and contained messages from members of lots of different levels of the company. The messages were addressed to Bacardi employees of 2062. That year will mark the 200th anniversary of the company being founded, and the time capsule will then be opened up. The time capsule also contains photographs of nearly 500 Bacardi employees representing 8 generations. There was also a commemorative medal honouring Bacardi rum as the world's most awarded spirit. Then there was a letter written in an ancient style of Chinese characters from their Chinese-based employees, a letter from their German employees, and a decorated African gourd. These are just some of the items from all over the world that are in there. The time capsule will be opened in a further 43 years, and not a moment sooner. And finally at the number 1 spot now we have Tesla. The Arch Mission Foundation is an organisation with a goal to create deposits of human knowledge around the solar system. They believe that the more spread out our knowledge is, the more likely it is to survive any sort of disaster, so that it can be preserved for future generations. In December 2017, the company's co-founder Novak Spivak heard that SpaceX was launching a Tesla into space. He actually tweeted at Elon Musk, who agreed to put the Arch discs of human knowledge onto the Tesla. It was named the Solar Library and is thought to just remain on this Tesla car as it orbits around the sun for the next few million years. Alright, starting off now, let's talk about the cyclotron time capsule. Pretty cool name, right? So imagine this scenario. You find a 130-year-old time capsule with all kinds of unknown secrets inside it. You go to dig it up, but oh no, there's an 18-ton magnet right on top of it. How did that happen? Well, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, otherwise known as MIT, a time capsule was buried in 1889. In the decades that followed, everyone forgot the time capsule existed. It fell out of time and memory. 50 years later, the university built their cyclotron particle accelerator right on top of the time capsule's burial spot. For those of you wondering what exactly a cyclotron is, I went to the MIT website and they say a cyclotron is a charged particle accelerator that uses a magnetic field to confine particles to a spiral flight path in a vacuum chamber. Don't worry if that doesn't make any sense to you, it doesn't to me either. All you need to know is that it's essentially a massive magnet. It was right on top of the time capsule, and so by the time anyone remembered it was there, it was kind of already too late. Eventually the cyclotron was deactivated, but that didn't really help the situation. The 18-ton magnet was still just sitting on top of the time capsule. It's too big to move right now, nobody knows what's inside the time capsule, and it's been like this for 130 years now and counting. At this rate, it may go on to be the oldest time capsule in America. Moving on now, we have the Baltimore box. This is a 104-year-old time capsule found in Baltimore in 2014. It was discovered during the renovation of the original Washington Monument. It had been placed behind a plaque in a small enclosed space on September 12, 1915. Monument officials discovered it while restoring the interior of the monument. They wanted to know what the original plaster looked like, and so they looked behind the plaque, and there, to their surprise, surprise was the time capsule. Now they believe the time capsule contains commemorative programs from an event and copies of the local newspaper, which is the Baltimore Sun. Naturally, the next step was to open this thing up. However, there was a catch. The reason for the initial renovation was because the monument was suffering from water damage. The time capsule was also in danger. Conservationists feared that the time capsule's contents had been exposed to the dampness for nearly a century and that it may not survive an opening. The box was moved to the nearby Walters Art Museum for safekeeping while restoration continued on the Washington Monument. It was thought the box might never have been opened, but then in 2015 they went for it. To their surprise, the contents were in much better condition than they had originally feared. Now there is debate as to whether they should open the other one at all, but a lot of people say it might be a lot better. So just, go for it. Crank that open. Moving on now, we have Kalpatra. That's the name of a very famous time capsule from India that many people want to open, but first they'll have to find it. In the 1970s, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the much-loved leader of India. It was somewhat of a golden age, at least for her career. She wanted a way to solidify this moment forever, to capture it so that future generations would know what that time in India was like. It was also 25 years since India gained independence from the British Empire, so it seemed like a good occasion for a time capsule. The government was also keen on documenting the first 25 years of this new independent India. Because of all this, they decided to build the time capsule and name it Kalpatra. The Indian Council of Historical Research were tasked with coming up with the most important moments in Indian history to put into the time capsule. Professor Krishna Wami led the team and set about getting a huge manuscript ready. Everything looked good, but then things took a turn for the worst. The professor sent his manuscript to famous historian T. Badranath for his opinion. Badranath said that the manuscript had misrepresented historical facts about India. It was back to the drawing board. Meanwhile, things were kicking off for the Prime Minister. Critics said that she was trying to exalt herself in this time capsule. The arguments continued until the time capsule was finally buried in 1973. It was intended to be buried for 1,000 years. It didn't quite last that long. Just 4 years later, the Prime Minister and her government were overthrown. Within a few days, the time capsule was dug up. It cost more than 7 times the cost to dig it up than it did to bury it. Some journalists claim to have witnessed what was inside the time capsule, but soon after it disappeared altogether. To this day, nobody knows where the time capsule is or what exactly is inside it. Some people think it has to be something pretty dark for the government to dig it up and hide it away so quickly. In the years since then, many people have pressed the Indian government about what happened to this Kalpatra time capsule and what exactly is inside it. Next up, we have the Corona capsules. In the 1950s and 1960s, time capsules were buried at the Corona High School in California. They were supposed to be opened in the future to give an insight into the life of a school kid at that time. Somehow though, everyone just forgot where the time capsules were buried. Oops. Oops. In 2012, a team of archaeologists used radar equipment over concrete slabs at the former school, hoping to pick up a signal from the 17 missing time capsules. Some of the former students actually attended, and they too could only guess as to where they were. Some people thought that the capsules may have actually been removed and then moved to the new high school during construction. This new search that everyone was taking part in was pushed because of a pilot TV show for the Travel Channel about unearthing unusual things. They used the radar scans to create three-dimensional images of the ground below. They detected 2 spots that seemed unusual. The first one was a false alarm. An archaeologist had uncovered a concrete slab only to find a heap of concrete and plaster underneath it. 6 hours later, the team found a buried surface about 12 feet long by 5 feet wide and about 3 feet below the surface. It seemed promising, but the box they found did not resemble the time capsule that had been buried before. The school is now the historic Civic Center, and the council is reluctant to keep digging it up to search for these time capsules. By the end of that day in 2012, the team had given up hope. The time capsules had to be down there somewhere, but it may take another 50 years until anybody is able to find them. Moving on now, we have the MASH capsule. For those of you who have never heard of MASH, it was an American war comedy drama show on TV from 1972 to 1983. It was a hugely popular show for over a decade and has been consistently ranked in the top 50 greatest TV shows of all time. The final episode was filmed in January January 1983. Afterwards, the cast of the TV show buried a time capsule in a secret ceremony there. It contained props and costumes from the show over the years. Now, like I said, the burying of the capsule took place in a secret ceremony. As such, nobody knows where this was buried. All that's known is that it was buried somewhere underneath the 20th Century Fox parking lot in Hollywood. In the years since then, this parking lot has shrunk in size as buildings were built over it. This has led some people to believe that the capsule is now directly under the Marriott Hotel. For many years, this was just the accepted story. The MASH capsule was somewhere under a car park or a building next to it. That's not much use when it comes to figuring out where this priceless capsule is. However, years later, Alan Alda, one of the actors on the show, wrote a book in which he claimed that the MASH time capsule had been found. He said it was discovered by a construction worker shortly after the show ended. When the worker tried to return the capsule to Alda and the rest of the crew, Alda told him to keep it. So that means the capsule is either underneath a parking lot, underneath a building, or it's in the hands of a construction worker who may or may not have opened or buried it. Well, at least we've narrowed it down.
Starting off in our 10th spot, we have the Capsules of Ancient Egypt. Now, ancient Egypt is known for having several unexplored tombs, tunnels, and crypts. Now, the crypts themselves are often referred to as time capsules because of all the hidden artifacts preserved inside. Other people believe that there are tons of time capsules hidden throughout ancient Egypt, although they wouldn't be the typical ones that we have today. They believe that these would contain artifacts and scrolls that could give us more information on ancient Egypt. However, people believe that if you open these capsules, then you will be subject to an ancient Egyptian curse, or that you will trigger some sort of booby trap and be killed in the process. Other people believe that if you don't open the capsules correctly, then it could completely destroy the artifacts inside. It's frustrating because these capsules could help us learn more about ancient Egypt, but at the same time, nobody wants to be cursed. Moving on, at number 9, we have the mysterious time capsule at the Washington Monument. Now, during construction of the Washington Monument, workers discovered a mysterious time capsule. They said that this time capsule was over 100 years old. The capsule was found behind a bronze plaque that had September 12, 1915 engraved on it. People believe that that was roughly the time that the capsule was placed there. Now, no one knows who made this capsule or why it was there. It still remains a huge mystery to this day. Now, many people didn't want to open the capsule, fearing that it may destroy the contents. But they didn't listen, and a year later it was opened. Thankfully, none of the contents were destroyed. Now, I know I technically cheated with this one because they opened it, but this story was too interesting to not include. They still don't know who put it there. In the capsule, there was a copy of George Washington's second inaugural address, a glass bottle with his portrait, and some coins. So did somebody put it there on behalf of George Washington, or what? Mystery remains. At number 8, we have the refrigerator capsules. Now, in 1939, Westinghouse House filled a capsule with hundreds of items. Some items included alarm clocks, hats, and alphabet blocks. Now, a man named Wayne Donaldson was inspired by that, and in the 60s decided to fill a refrigerator and bury it on a hill. A bunch of other individuals followed in his lead and also did this. Apparently, using a fridge worked really well because it kept bugs out and preserved the items. Now, Wayne decided to put items such as a lava lamp, photos, and hit records in the fridge. All of these individuals plan to dig up their fridge when they are 80. But seriously, hold on one second. Fridges are expensive and they would be a hassle to bury, so you won't catch me doing that. Now, there is a conspiracy that some other people have buried some fridges of their own, but these fridges won't contain lava lamps. Instead, they believe that it may contain dead bodies. In our 7th spot, we have the photograph time capsule. Now, this next story was posted by a Reddit user. Although I'm not sure of its validity, it was too good to not include in this video. So this user said that 20 years ago, him and his 4 childhood friends made and buried time capsules. Now, they almost forgot about their time capsules, but eventually they remembered and dug them up when they were around 30. But when they dug it up, the user found something more terrifying. Now, in his capsule, he originally placed 2 medals, a $5 bill, and a Charmander Pokemon card. However, all that he found in his time capsules were photos. Now, he really should not have opened this capsule. Each photo was of him at a different stage of his life, and it was labeled. The first photo was of him at his father's funeral. The caption wrote, "Soon you'll wish you could join your father." Another photo was at his graduation. The person that took this photo is said to be Karma. Now, this is quite scary because he doesn't know who had been taking these photos of him and how it got inside the time capsule. Now, this story may be fake, but people believe that it was the user from a parallel universe contacting himself. One thing for sure is that this Reddit user wishes that he listened to his instinct that told him to not open the capsule. Coming in at number 6, we have the Expo 70 time capsule. Now, this time capsule was created by Panasonic and the Mainichi newspaper. They wanted to create 2 time capsules that preserved life and heritage. Now, the lower time capsule is going to remain buried for another 5,000 more years. The upper capsule was opened in 2000 and another would be opened every 100 years. Now, each capsule is said to contain 2,098 objects. A lot of the objects in the capsules are still unknown. However, some have reported items such as false teeth, handcuffs, a glass eye, and insects and resin. Like seriously, what a random mixture of things. But what are the other items in the capsules? Well, I don't think we'll be alive to get the answer to that question. But hey, if you're watching this video in the year 6000, then comment down below. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the largest axe in the world. Now, let's make our way to my country, Canada. In New Brunswick, a giant axe monument was constructed. This was to commemorate the importance of the lumber and forestry business. Honestly, this is one of the most Canadian things, I swear. Now, this axe is huge. It is made out of 55 tons of steel. It's 23 feet in length and the handle extends about 50 feet in the air. It's massive. Now, apparently there is a time capsule hidden in the axe head, and people believe that it will never be discovered. Seriously, what do they have to hide? Why would they put a time capsule somewhere that can't be accessed? And I don't think anyone is going to destroy this monument, so it's safe to say that we will never know Canada's secret. But honestly, it makes me think, what other monuments have time capsules inside of them? Maybe the Statue of Liberty? Who knows? But knowing Canada is probably just something like a maple syrup recipe or how to make the best poutine, I don't know. At number 4, we have the haunted capsule. Now, this is another story posted on Reddit. What's freaky is I ended up writing about this and then I went back to the page and it no longer existed, so I don't even know. So on January 20th, 2018, this user and his friend found a time capsule while using a metal detector out in the forest. The time capsule had "Please don't open" written on the lid. His friend really wanted to open it, but the user got a bad vibe from it. He even said that when he touched the capsule to open the lid, he felt cold all of a sudden and his vision went dark for a bit. Now, the friend ended up taking the capsule home, but immediately regretted it. He said that the whole night he felt like someone was watching him. The next day they went back and reburied the time capsule. But they still don't know who put it there, why, and what's inside. Honestly, I'm just glad that they didn't open it. Like, it probably would have just unleashed some sort of demon. Sounds like a good basis for a scary movie though. Coming in at number 3, we have the Crypt of Civilization. Now, this chamber was built from 1937 to 1940. And you heard correctly, it's a whole dang chamber, not just a tiny capsule. It's a full 2,000 cubic foot room filled with documents and artifacts. Now, you're not allowed to open the chamber for around another 6,000 years. So the purpose of the chamber is actually terrifying. It is said to be compiled with knowledge and other contents to preserve our way of life in case of mass extinction. So this room contains items such as 800 works of every subject, historical recordings, and items to show our technological advancements like typewriters. There are other random items like pantyhose and a figurine of Donald Duck, you know, the important stuff. There's also a device that will instruct those who find the chamber to learn how to speak English. Now, people believe that this was made because humanity won't live much longer. They think that another species will dominate, or that the government has some sort of sinister plan to deal with overpopulation. This chamber will hold the last memories of the human race. But seriously, imagine finding this chamber and seeing pantyhose. Like, I wouldn't know what they're for. Like, putting them on my legs would be the last thing I would do. Next up at number 2, we have Franklin Roosevelt's time capsule. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the 32nd president of the United States. Now, in 1940, Mr. Roosevelt buried a 450-pound time capsule, which is said to be opened in 2040. That's right, this thing is massive. But oddly enough, no one knows what is actually in there. Seems hard to believe that the president was able to bury a huge time capsule with no one even questioning it. When researching, there's hardly any information on it, and people believe that that's for a reason. People think that what the capsule contains poses a threat to national security and should never be opened. They fear that it will reveal harmful government secrets. Other people hope that it will have the frozen president himself in there, which wouldn't make that much sense if he was still alive when it was buried. But all we can do is make assumptions and hope that nothing bad happens when it's opened in 20 years. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Richard Nixon time capsule. Now, Richard Nixon was the 37th president of the United States and was said to have hidden a time capsule in the White House. What does this capsule contain, you ask? Well, according to Earl Robert Merritt, Richard confided in him that it contains proof of extraterrestrials. Now, some people don't believe Earl and question his credibility, but he swears that the president met with him in secret and read him a letter stating that the US was protecting extraterrestrials. He also claims that scientists were conducting experiments and communicating with them. Now, the location of this time capsule is still unknown. Only a handful of people know where it's hidden. However, Nixon claimed that it will surface when the time is right. What do you think? Are aliens real? Will this time capsule expose the US government? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Starting off this countdown, we have the Robert E. Lee statue. In September of 2021, a statue of Robert E. Lee was taken down in Virginia following the protests of the death of George Floyd. Upon taking down the statue, they found a 134-year-old time capsule buried underneath it. The capsule was uncovered inside of a square box, which was 20 feet up inside the granite block that the statue was mounted on. It's thought that the capsule was placed in the pedestal 2 years before the statue was erected. It is believed to contain items from the Civil War and even a rare picture of President Abraham Lincoln lying in his coffin. They just hope that the items have not been damaged by water. The opening of the capsule is said to be performed by a preservation team at a lab within a couple of days. Moving on to number 9, we have the Expo 70 time capsule. In 1970, 2 major manufacturers decided to create 2 time capsules that would remain unopened for 5,000 years. This was done for the 1970 Expo in Osaka, Japan. So each capsule contains 2,098 objects or recorded items. These items were culturally significant objects to the people of Japan, and most were actually recommended by the public to be put in there. You got everything from music to art to recorded messages and even literature in there. There's also apparently a slinky, ceremonial kimono, and the blackened fingernail of a survivor from the Hiroshima atomic bombing. Now, the time capsules have 2 sets of instructions. The lower capsule will remain buried for 5,000 years. The upper capsule was to be opened in 2000, which it was, and then every 100 years from that, it will be reopened to then be cleaned to ensure its survival. Coming in at number 8, we have the Nickelodeon time capsule. Not gonna lie, I am most excited for this one, just because Nickelodeon played a huge role in my childhood. So Nickelodeon buried a time capsule in 1992. They filled it with tons of 90s memorabilia, including a Game Boy, Home Alone on VHS, a box of Twinkies, and a jar of GAC. They then buried it in front of Nickelodeon Studios at Universal City, California. It is planned to be open on April 30th, 2042, 50 years after it was buried. So set your calendar, folks. I'm excited. Moving on at number 7, we have George Lucas. Do we have any big Star Wars fans here? How about Indiana Jones? Why do I ask? Well, George Lucas created his very own time capsule and buried it at Skywalker Ranch. Apparently, the time capsule contains a number of priceless Star Wars memorabilia and artifacts. AKA, that time capsule is gonna be worth millions of dollars. But here's the thing, Lucas never wants the capsule to be unearthed. He said, and I quote, "It's for some archaeologists 2,000 years from now to discover. We have an archive and it is very big, but after a few hundred years it will be gone. So the only thing left is the time capsule." So thousands of years from now, archaeologists will unearth this treasure and be like, yo, how cool was Earth back then? They had lightsabers? That's sick. You know, they won't know what the heck this is. Moving on at number 6, we have the Los Angeles Bicentennial Time Capsule. In 1976, Los Angeles celebrated its bicentennial by burying a time capsule. And you're not going to believe what they put inside of it. They wanted the time capsule to reflect the era. So inside, they put a pet rock and a skateboard. How fitting is that? But they also put a dress worn by none other than Cher and a Lakers basketball jersey, among other memorabilia. All I care about is Cher's dress though. The capsule is set to open in 2076 for the city's tricentennial. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Martin Luther King Jr. time capsule. Located under the Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. is a time capsule buried in 1988. This time capsule contains the belongings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You'll find a number of his personal possessions, such as his Bible, a robe he wore to preach in, and most importantly, the audio recordings of a number of his speeches. This capsule is said to be unearthed in 2088. Moving on to number 4, we have the Westinghouse time capsules. The Westinghouse time capsules are 2 time capsules created by the Westinghouse Electric Manufacturing Company. Both were buried at different times, but to be opened at the same time. The first was buried in 1939 and is said to be opened in 6939. This one contains microfilm, newsreels, seeds, and fabrics. The other time capsule was created in 1964 and is also meant to be opened in 6939. This one contains an electric watch, electric toothbrush, among hundreds of other items that were popular and in demand at that time. Coming in at number 3, we have Bunker Hill. Now, this time capsule is pretty odd. So it was buried in 1961 in Los Angeles and was said to be opened on May 9th of 2011. Yet it has never been opened. Either people forgot about it, or they lost the capsule, or people just can't be bothered to dig it up. But it makes for a good scavenger hunt if you want to go out and find it yourself. I'm just kidding. This capsule is said to contain old telephone equipment, including transistors, solar batteries, and an operator's headset. And now I genuinely want to know what happened to this capsule. Did they just forget where it is or something? Like, I want to know. In our second spot, we have the Sleeping Beauty Castle capsule. In 1995, a time capsule was actually buried at Disneyland. It was buried in Sleeping Beauty's castle. So the next time you go there to take a picture in front of the castle, just think to yourself, wow, I'm standing right above a time capsule. Apparently, this capsule contains artifacts representing the first 40 years of Disneyland. But we still don't know exactly what items are in there. I just predict a lot of Mickey Mouse memorabilia. This time capsule is actually going to be opened very soon, and soon I mean 2035, which is close compared to some of the ones on today's list that won't be open for like thousands of years, okay? And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Crypt of Civilization. This is definitely one time capsule that you do not want opened. Why? Well, it was created in case of the downfall of society, and it's unlike any other capsule on this list. That's because it's not just a tiny box, but it's a full-on chamber. So it was built from 1937 to 1940. It's a 2,000 cubic foot room filled with documents and artifacts, like 640,000 pages of microfilmed books, religious texts, etc. It even contains a special language integrator to help teach English to whoever finds the vault. It also contains items such as 800 works of every subject, historical recordings, and items to show our technological advancements like typewriters. Now, the opening date of this capsule is not for another 600 years, or like I said, until our society fails. This vault is said to preserve our way of life in case of a mass extinction. There's also a bunch of random stuff in this vault that I had to let you guys know, like there's Lincoln Logs, throwback to those, pantyhose, because why not, and a figurine of Donald Duck. Yes, because those items are imperative for a society to flourish. Imperative.
Starting us off at number 10 is Time magazine. completely unrelated to what might be inside this capsule of the past, something about the fact that Time magazine has a time capsule scratches a wonderful little itch in my brain. This historical tube was sealed back in 1959 and placed in the building's 800-pound cornerstone with a unique plan in mind: a two-part reveal. The original idea was to open the capsule this year in 2023 on the company's 100th birthday, and that some items would be replaced or supplemented with new documents before being sealed a second time to await its final opening 100 years from now in 2123. Inside there are allegedly documents relating to the company's founding, speeches, a letter relating to the launch of Sports Illustrated, and the prolific red pencil used by original Time editors, among other trinkets. Now, this plan for the twice-baked opening could very well still happen, just not exactly how it was planned, as the Time company has changed buildings since the capsule was first sealed, and so they'll need to move it from where it stood the last half century in order to complete the plan. The question is, from there, do they put it back in the original spot or bring it to the new location? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Coming in at number 9 is the Nickelodeon capsule. Unlike every other time capsule on this list, this one is probably the only one that was put together by and for kids. Buried back in 1992, it's supposedly filled with goodies that will make any 90s kid vibrate in their seats, like a Game Boy, Home Alone on VHS, a box of Twinkies, a skateboard, and a jar of gack. Even cooler is that the network actually crowdsourced for the time capsule from the Kids World Council to make sure that it would best suit the youth of the time. Originally, it was buried in front of Nickelodeon Studios in Florida, but has since moved twice and is now planted at their California studio. I mean, this one might be one of the ones I'm most excited for, only because of all the nostalgia it will bring when it gets revealed to the world. Coming in at number 8 is the world's largest axe. Found in the beautiful Nakawik, New Brunswick, otherwise known as the forestry capital of Canada, is the world's largest axe. The behemoth stands 49 feet tall and weighs over 55 tons, but it's inside its near 23-foot long steel axe head that all the goodies are kept. The time capsule has stood there since the statue's construction in 1991, and no one really knows what's being hidden inside, which has only added to its intrigue. Does it have to do with the company who built the monument, artifacts related to the province, or is it even something a little more spicy? I say we crack it open and have a look for ourselves. Coming in at number 7 is FDR's time capsule. A lot is known about the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but one of the things that remains a mystery of the wartime president is the elusive capsule that he left behind. I mean, minus a speech that he wrote for the capsule's celebration at the University of Pennsylvania, no one really has any clue what the heck is inside the tube. Here is what we do know. It was buried on campus back in 1940 and it weighs 450 pounds, so there is definitely more than a letter inside. Some have speculated it could contain military secrets from World War II, others think it could contain speeches from famous leaders at the time, or perhaps it's a little less exciting and just contains some mementos of the time. But nonetheless, it's the not knowing that makes this one of the most interesting on the list. I mean, when the possibilities are endless, it is easy to dream. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see like everybody else. Coming in at number 6 is Cleopatra's Needle. First erected in ancient Egypt in 1450 BCE, Cleopatra's Needle found its way into the US after the Khedive of Egypt gifted the monument to Americans in 1881 to commemorate the construction of the Suez Canal. But what many aren't aware of is that it's not just a high-traffic tourist attraction, but that it actually sits on top of a historical time capsule. Prior to its arrival in New York, 2 capsules were buried, one containing the 1870 census, a Bible, a dictionary, the complete works of Shakespeare, a guide to Egypt, and a written copy of the Declaration of Independence. However, the second capsule put there by the editor of the New York World and the man who organized the transportation of the monument, William Henry Hulbert, remains a mystery to this day. And who knows, maybe this will be the year we finally find out what is hiding underneath the ancient Egyptian obelisk. Coming in at number 5 is the world's largest time capsule. In 1975, a local businessman named Harold Keith Davison put together a time capsule so large that it actually garnered him a Guinness World Record in 1977 and hasn't been surpassed since. Harold put together the capsule on the 4th of July, but instead of a tube like most others, he actually buried a 45-ton vault beneath the front yard of his furniture store. Although no one knows for sure, it's rumored that the vault contains various personal items belonging to Davison, like an aquamarine leisure suit, a Chevy Vega with 0 miles on it, and some bikini bottoms which may not have belonged to him but sound sentimental for some other reason. Sadly, Davis died in 1999, so he will not be able to witness the faces of his community when his time capsule is revealed. But his legacy remains, and just about anyone you ask in Seward, Nebraska is counting down the days until the big reveal. Now, truthfully speaking, at this moment in time, its official opening date is actually set for 2025. But maybe if we're lucky, they might just crack into it a few years early. Either way, the contents of the world's largest time capsule will soon be revealed. Next up at number 4 is George Lucas's time capsule. Calling all Star Wars fans, if you have ever wanted to get your hands on some mint condition Star Wars memorabilia, then you might be in luck. The establishment of Skywalker Ranch marked the beginning of a new era for George Lucas and his production company, Lucasfilm. And what better way to celebrate your career as one of the highest grossing director, writer, producers of all time than with a celebration of the Star Wars franchise buried on the property of the new movie ranch. The historical capsule was buried on the company's annual 4th of July picnic back in 1981 and is said to contain original Star Wars merch, action figures, paperbacks of the original novel, and a 17-minute Super 8 reel from The Empire Strikes Back, among many other mysterious memorabilia. I mean, I for one am dying to know just what else is hidden inside, but if you are planning on getting your hands on any of it, you better start saving. I mean, any vintage merch is valuable these days. Just imagine when this puppy gets unearthed, I bet the cost is gonna be wild. Coming in at number 3 is Westinghouse capsules. Lots of great things come in pairs. Socks, skis, chopsticks, and of course, time capsules are no different. However, these two capsules were not created or even buried at the same time, which is definitely unusual. The first of them was buried back in 1939 under the site of the New York World's Fair in Queens by the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company, which of course is where it gets the name. Inside the OG capsule is supposedly newsreels, seeds, a pack of Camel cigarettes, a Sears catalog, and even a message from Albert Einstein, among other celebrities of the time. Now, why they added another capsule into play in 1965 was never flat out explained, but speculating from the alleged contents, I'm gonna guess that because of the crazy advancements that had happened since the first, they wanted future generations to see what else they had created. Things like an electric toothbrush, freeze-dried food, a Beatles album, and the birth control pill are said to be stored inside. Now, full disclosure, the instructions on this capsule say that it is not to be opened until 6939, exactly 5,000 years after its burial date. But I mean, none of us will be around by then, and I am dying to know what's inside. Can't we just crack it open now and then seal it back up? Coming in at number 2 is General Dynamics capsule. In 1963, on the 5th anniversary of the opening of General Dynamics Astronomics facility in San Diego, researchers decided to commemorate the achievement by creating a time capsule dedicated to the American space community. However, unlike most time capsules, it's not just filled with gadgets and trinkets to honor the time, although I am sure it has that too. It's most well known for a booklet that's said to be inside. The booklet has apparently been in the hands of prominent astronauts, world leaders, researchers, and military personnel, and contains predictions of how they expect space exploration to have advanced over time, and maybe even a few secrets about aliens? Okay, that one is just a personal prediction, but I mean, I would not be surprised if there were some alien secrets hidden in a space time capsule. I'm just saying. And last Last up today in our number 1 spot is crypt civilization. One might venture to say that the Egyptian pyramids are kind of like the OG time capsule. I mean, there are tons of rumors about things that were hidden deep inside the head of the Sphinx, and who knows, it could have been where we got the idea to start this phenomenon in the first place. Well, if not as a whole, it seems like that may have been Atlanta University's former president Thornwell Jacobs' inspiration. Buried in 1940, it was modeled after a cell that one might find in an Egyptian pyramid, and inside the gigantic vault lies items that have been deemed crucial to our civilization thus far. Although considering it was sealed prior to the release of Spice Girls Wannabe, I have some provisions that I would like to make. Mementos such as classic works of film and literature, all the books of faith, the original script of Gone with the Wind, a sealed bottle of Budweiser, and a typewriter are said to be kept inside. Not only that, it seems Mr. Jacobs was thinking ahead at the time of the capsule sealing, as he had an inkling that it would be found by aliens. So at the front of the crypt lies a language integrator, which is apparently a machine intended to help the aliens who open the crypt with our mother tongue. I mean, I can't say I'm not intrigued.